Okay, so we are back to Machshavah Lab tefilah. I think it's been a month, which sounds crazy. This year was originally supposed to be given a month ago, and we just didn't have like enough of our regulars, and so I canceled it. And I've kind of alluded to this in a bunch of my other shiurim, but this is a big myth busting shiur about what we mean by the nusach of tefilah. Okay. But because it's been a month, I wanted to start by just reviewing what we did last time. Okay, so brief overview. Feel free to ask questions if you have them because this is still going to be on the same topic. But last time we went over the Rambam's presentation of the change in tefillah that occurred at the time of Ezra and his Beis Din, the Anshe Knesset Hagdolah. So Rambam begins by saying, I'm just going to paraphrase and I'll have the text on screen, but I don't want to reread everything again. So Mida Oraisa from the Torah, Rambam holds that it's a mitzvah to daven every day, okay, once a day. And the Rambam says that Mida Oraisa, there is no number of tefillahs you have to say each day, okay, meaning beyond once a day. There's no text of tefillah, which he calls here a mishnah of tefillah, which literally means a teaching. And then there's no set time for tefillah. But rather each person would basically engage in their own tefillah as long as it was shevach, bakasha, then hodah, praise and request, and then thanks, once a day in their own way, and they would do it facing the Mishkan, wherever the Mishkan was. Okay, so then fast forward to the 6th century BCE. In 586 BCE, Nebuchadnezzar destroyed the base of Mikdash, and the Jews were exiled into a bunch of other lands, and their languages became mixed up, and they could not speak entirely in Hebrew. Okay, and the way the Rambam says it is he says, they were not able to speak all of their needs in one language, but rather just in a confusion. And then he says the problem was, this part I'll read, because of this, when one of them would daven, his language would be too deficient to ask for his desires, or to proclaim the praises of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the holy language, without mixing in other languages. Okay, so then because of this, Ezra and his Beis Din created 18 brachos in order, 3 brachos of praise, then 12 brachos of request, and then 3 brachos of thanksgiving. And then he says, why? So that they should be arranged in everyone's mouths, and everyone can learn them. And that the tefillah of these stammers would be a perfect prayer, like the tefillah of someone who has clear speech. Okay, so that was the problem. That was the original form of tefillah, the problem, and the solution. Okay, so we asked a bunch of questions, well, really 5 questions, which I'm going to reread because we didn't answer all of them last time, and I want to be on the lookout for the answers this time. So question 1, what was so problematic about the Jews post-Nebuchadnezzar speaking a mixture of languages rather than entirely in Lashon HaKodesh, especially considering the fact that according to according to the halachos that Ezra and his Beis Din set up, we can daven in other languages. How much of the problem was the mixture, or was the idea of purely one language, or specifically Lashon HaKodesh? Okay. Question 2, why couldn't people ask for their needs or praise God properly? Who cares that their languages were mixed and they couldn't do it in Hebrew? At the end of the day, aren't they still asking for their needs and praising Hashem? Question 3, what exactly was the goal of Ezra and his Beis Din in this change? Rambam says, so that the tefillah of these stammers would be a perfect prayer like the tefillah of one who possesses clear speech, but it seems like their enactments had other goals as well. What were they trying to accomplish beyond solving the initial problems? 4, why did they take this specific road to solving the problem? Most of the solutions Beis Din comes up with do not involve changing the entire structure of the mitzvah. Why not come up with some other solution? And then 5, doesn't their solution take away an essential part of the deoraisa, namely the personal element of tefillah? By standardizing the tefillah, they fundamentally altered this critical aspect of tefillah as self-judgment, right? So we said that the way that tefillah is supposed to work midoraisa is lihispala l'Hashem, means to judge yourself in Hashem's framework, and you are thinking about yourself through the lens of praise, which is who you are and who God is and where you are in relation to God and how you fit into his world. Then you're thinking about yourself in terms of request by assessing your needs and asking, do I really need this or do I not? Where do these needs come from? Am I really doing everything I can to obtain these things? How am I dependent on God? And then you're thinking about yourself in terms of thanks, in terms of reflecting on the good that you've gotten from God. And so the D'Oraisa allows you to think and reflect and self-evaluate in a very free form. So it seems like Ezra and Beis Din kind of steamrolled over that and just made everything uniform, which kind of like, you know, makes the self-judgment not impossible, but definitely different. Okay, so those were our questions. So we answered definitely the first two questions last time, which was my answer, which is that the problem was not the language per se, it was the ideas and values that are embedded in the language. So every language is a product of the ideas and values of the culture that uses it or that produced it. So when the Jews' languages got mixed up, their ideas and values became tainted by or distorted by the lens of the culture's values. And so when they would try to engage in asking for their needs, it would be filtered through those values. Or another way to put it is, instead of judging themselves in Hashem's framework, they would judge themselves through the framework of the values of their culture. And I gave a couple examples. Wealth in our culture, in America, you say, "Wait, make me wealthy." You're asking for a lot of money. But in Torah culture, it's sameach b'chalko, being content with what you have, or strength. You know, in Greek Hellenistic Spartan culture, strength is physical strength. But in our culture, it's inner strength of conquering your inclination. Or to be a chacham, there is no concept of chacham in American culture. There's an intellectual, there's an academic, there's a smarty pants, but there's no chacham who embodies this like intellectual and moral perfection with wisdom and everything that implies. Okay, so the problem was really the ability to think, because we think in language, and because languages are they therefore limit your thoughts and feelings, so to the words that are available. So then that was the problem, and that's why Ezra and Beis Din had to create this the solution. Okay, so that I think covers what we did last time. Okay, any questions on that before we go on to the new part? Okay, so today's mission is to answer the question, okay, what exactly did Ezra and his Beis Din do? Okay, what was this nusach ha-Tefillah? Okay, which nusach I think literally means formulation. Okay, of prayer. What was this nusach ha-Tefillah that they created? Okay, that's going to be the big question. But then this is going to open up a huge can of worms in terms of the question of what's the nature of the nusach that we have today. Okay, so this is going to take a few sessions to explore. Okay, but this is our mission for today. Okay, let me think how I want to start. I think the best way to start. Okay, well, I included. I showed this on Wednesday night here. I found this cute little meme cartoon that someone made. So I'm gonna just describe it verbally. There's this classroom, and on the board it says the Siddur throughout history, and it's like a tree that starts with one branch and then goes into two, and then a bunch of other ones. And then at the very, very end, there's a circle around the branches, and the person making the presentation says, "So this is where we came along and finally reconstructed the original text of the Siddur." And then this little kid is looking at the adult there saying, "Hashem is so lucky to have us." Okay. So I think this cartoon represents the way that many of us think about the text of the Siddur. Okay. Esther, you came on just at the right part because we just reviewed and we just started the new stuff. So you didn't miss anything new. So what I want to do, so again, for many years, I thought about this. I thought that this is how it worked. And in my mind, okay, let me just go through a quick nusach history, personal nusach history. So when I first converted to Judaism, I davened nusach Sfard, okay, which is the Hasidic nusach, also called nusach Ari. People say it's different, but it's really like essentially in the same nusach family. And the only reason why I davened that was because when my family was buying art scroll sidurim, and we were in the store, I was like, oh, I like the blue, the blue spine more than the red spine. I don't even think I knew that there was a difference. I think we just bought one of each, and I was like, oh, I like blue, So I got that. So I davened nusach Sfard up until I came to yeshiva. And when I came to yeshiva, is when I started looking into the other. Actually, no, it was sorry. I started looking into the other nuschaos when I was on MCSY Kollel, and I was I this was back when I had a unfortunately this lapsed. Maybe I can still resurrect it. I had somewhat of a correspondence relationship with Rav Herschel Schachter, and I actually asked him about like this idea of the origins of Nusach Sfard, and it must have been very early when I came to yeshiva because he mailed me a package with like sources that he had, I guess, compiled for me about Nusach Sfard, and like I don't know where this is now. I'm still like surprised that he mailed this. Again, the memory's very hazy. And then I basically looked into it and then switched to Nusach Ashkenaz, and specifically the Nusach of the Gra, which is what our yeshiva uses. And I dived in that for a while. And then in 2007, for various reasons, I switched to the Nusach of the Rambam. Okay. One of the reasons was that I had this view of Nusach, that there was this original Nusach, this original text of the Siddur, and that what we should try to do is to try to get back to the original and as much as possible, and in my mind, like Ashkenaz is obviously a legitimate nusach, but like it's a hodgepodge of many, many different additions that were added later on. And in my mind, the Rambam's nusach, which was adopted by the Yemenite community, is more authentic, quote unquote. So that was one of the driving forces behind me switching nuschaos. Okay, so but still, I retained this idea of the original nusach. Okay, until this year. Okay, and this is when I discovered what I'm calling the big myth, and that's what we're going to read now. Okay, so before
Can I ask a question on that quickly?
Yeah, sure.
Do you mind?
Yeah.
Do you have to go through like a process when you change nusach, or you can just like do it?
Okay, so this is another question which I have different answers to now. Okay, so when I looked through it initially, then I was under the impression that, and I don't even remember if I asked for psak. I think I must have, that I had to do a hataras nadarim, a release of vows, because the nusach was, I was under the impression that nusach was had the halachic status of a specific minhag, and a minhag is a type of neder, or at least the mechanism it operates through is a neder. And so I did a hataras nadarim when I switched from Sfard to Ashkenaz, and then from Ashkenaz to Rambam, I did another hataras nadarim. But now, after bursting the big myth, I'm not so sure that that's the case. And even the halachic sources that I was relying on that said I had to do a hataras nadarim, it's not clear to me that they were under the right impression. Okay, I question how prevalent this myth is. Okay, and so that's why this is a can of worms here, because I think that this is something that I'm going to try to show that this is in the classical sources, but I think that this is something that a lot of people are under false impressions about. Yeah, Ayala?
Is the Rambam's account of like how the Siddur became, or the formulation of tefilah, like universally agreed upon?
No, it's not. Unfortunately, there are not a lot of other accounts that I'm aware of that are as complete, and I do now want to look into that in terms of what are the other accounts. Okay, and as we're going to see in a second, Rambam is machmir, is strict when it comes to the text of the tefilah, more so than other halakas. Okay, I want to say one more thing, which is that, the other real can of worms here that we're going to end off on, which we're not going to answer, is we will emerge from this with open questions about how much freedom and fluidity we have in the nusach tefilah, and it's going to be much more than you ever thought. Okay, so to set that up, I want to show you two halachos in the Rambam, which we read last time, but we're going to emphasize different parts, and then I'll go through the big myth and the refutation of it. Okay, so Rambam in Hilchos Kriya Shema Aleph Zayin says as follows. So he mentions the Shema, which is psukim, and then the brachos of the Kriya Shema, and this is the first time he talks about brachos in the Mishnah Torah. Or when he talks about like the origin of brachos. Brachos elu, these brachos of the Kriya Shema, im shar kol habrachos aruchos b'fi kol Yisrael, with all the other brachos that are arranged in the mouths of all of Israel. Ezra ubeis din tiknum. Ezra and his ubeis dino and his court enacted them. Ve'ein adam rashai lefachos mehen v'lo lahosif alehem. No one is permitted to detract from them or to add to them, which I think means coming up with new brachos or taking away brachos. Malkum she'iskinu lachtom bebaruch, wherever they that's not the only way to read that sentence, by the way, but you'll see why I'm going with that in a second. Any place where they enacted that you should conclude with the phrase Baruch atah Hashem, Eino rashai shelo lachtam, then you're not permitted to not conclude that way. Umakom she'iskinu shelo lachtam, and in a place where they enacted to not conclude, Eino rashai lachtam, then you're not permitted to conclude that way. So we'll see this later on, but there's two types of brachos. There's what's called a bracha arucha and a bracha katsara, a long format bracha and a short format bracha. A long format bracha begins with Baruch atah Hashem and then ends with Baruch atah Hashem. So for example, the first bracha of Birkas Hamazon is Baruch Hashem Elokeinu Melech Hazanas Olam Kulo, blah blah blah, and then Baruch Hashem Hazanas Hakol. Okay, or the first bracha of Shimon Esrei is Baruch Hashem Elokeinu Osenu, and then ends Baruch Hashem Magen Avraham. So that's a long bracha, and then most other brachos are brachos kataros, which are kataros, short brachos. Baruch Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam Hamotzi Lechem Min Haaretz. Okay, one baruch, or Baruch Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam, Osim Maser Bereishis. Okay. So you cannot make a long one to a short one or a short one into a long one. Okay, and then he similarly says, Makom she'iskinu shelo liftoach bebarach, eno rasha liftoach, Makom she'iskinu liftoach, eno rasha shelo liftoach. Wherever they enacted to not begin with baruch, then you can't change that. And in a place where they enacted to begin with it, you cannot not change it. So for example, the bracha of Elokai neshama does not begin with baruch, and so you can't start it off with Baruch atah Hashem. Okay. Klalo shel davar. Now here's the important line: the sum of the matter. Kol hameshane mimatbea shetavu chachamim bebrachos. Anyone who changes from the matbea. Now matbea, we're going to have to come up with a good translation of this. It literally means coinage, okay, or mintage, like to mint coins. So that's why I'm using the verb mint. Anyone who changes from the coinage that the chachamim minted in brachos, harizet toeh, is making a mistake. The choser umavarch matbea, and he must go back and say the bracha again in accordance with the matbea. Okay, so on the surface, sounds like he's saying, he's putting an emphasis on the openings and closings of the brachos, but he is saying that if you change from this matbea, whatever that means, then you're making a mistake and you have to say the bracha over again. Okay, but then later on in Hilchos Brachos, he clarifies and somewhat contradicts himself, or seems to contradict himself. So in Hilchos Brachos, Aleph Hey, he says the nusach. This is now using the phrase nusach. I'm gonna go ahead and say nusach. Okay, and again, this literally means formulation. Okay, of kol brachos, of all the blessings, Ezra ubeis dino tiknum, was enacted by Ezra in his court. Ve'in roy l'shanosan. It is not proper to change them, to change the nusach, or to change the brachos. V'lo lahosif al achas mehen v'lo ligro mimena. Not to add to any one of them, nor to detract from it. Okay, so it sounds like he's talking about adding words to the brachos or taking away words from the brachos. And then he says, V'chol bracha she'ein ba, anyone who changes from the matbea that the sages minted in brachos, eino ela toeh, is only making a mistake. V'chol bracha she'ein ba haskaras Hashem u'malchus, any bracha that does not include the mention of God's name and kingship, eina bracha, is not a bracha, ela im kein haisa smucha l'chaverta, unless it is juxtaposed to another bracha. Okay, and then he says what we read last time about languages. Kol habrachos kula ne'emarim b'chol lashon. All brachos may be said in any language of Hushiyamar inyan shetiknu chachamim, as long as you said it in accordance with the inyan, difficult word to translate, the theme, concept, or subject instituted by the sages. V'imshina es hamatbea, but if he changed the matbea, hoyil v'hizkir azkara umachos v'inyan habracha v'afilu b'lashon chol yata. If he changed the matbea, then since he mentioned a divine name and kingship and the inyan of the bracha, even in a secular language, he has fulfilled his obligation. Okay, b'diavad, after the fact. Okay, so according to the Rambam in these halachos, okay, what would the? Oops, sorry, I'm just saying here. I'll just write this question here. So this is okay. So this is just a clarification question. Okay, which is clarification question. Okay, which is if you asked the Rambam, okay, can I edit a bracha? okay, and change the words to something different, okay, what would he say? So what's from your reading here, and I'm actually going to just copy and paste this into the chat. Oh, this is probably not going to fit. Nope, doesn't fit. Okay, so hold on a second here. I'm going to copy the Hebrew. Yeah, so you can be thinking about what would the Rambam say if you ask him, can I change a bracha? Oh man, this is so frustrating. Okay, I'm just going to put the Hebrew in there. Yeah, okay. What would he say? Yeah, Ayala?
I think you'd say definitely not, but if you do, as long as you have Malchus, the Hashem's name and the Indian of the bracha, then you would be Yosei, I guess.
Yeah, okay. So that's what it seems. As long as you have Hashem's name, his Malchus, and sorry, as long as you have a mention of Hashem's name, his Malchus, and the Indian of the bracha, then you're Yotze. Okay, then you fulfilled your obligation. You're Yotze b'diavad. Okay. I just because I don't know who's going to listen to this year, I do have to clarify two terms here. So in Hebrew, in halachic terms, we use this the phrase lechatchila, which is the formal translation apparently is ab initio. Okay, but no one obviously says that in real language. I think Art Scroll likes going with at the outset. Okay, or you could say like what you're supposed to do, all things being equal. Okay, or like ideal conduct. Okay, these are all like ways to translate it. And then we have b'diavad, which means a priori. You could say a priori. I think a priori is more used in terms of logic, not in terms of actions. I think, yeah, in the first place, yeah. So after the fact, b'diavad is after the fact. Okay, which is like if you done messed up, okay, or like in a non-ideal situation, okay, and for some reason whenever I taught 9th and 10th grade Gemara to girls, and I've never taught it to boys, so I don't know if boys would have the same mistake. There were always girls who could not get it through their head that like you have these two levels of halacha, like there's what you're supposed to do, and then failing that is what you did okay, so like I don't know why they can't get, like they say, well, if it's okay, then why can't you do it, so the best analogy I can give to try to make it relatable is like lechatchila, you should remember your friend's birthday and wish them a happy birthday, right? But b'diavad, if you forgot and you wish them a belated happy birthday, then that's also okay, Now, does that mean that wishing someone a belated happy birthday is equal to wishing them happy birthday and remembering it? Obviously not, right? But b'diavad, it's okay, But if you let's raise the stakes a bit, right? Is your spouse, right? If you totally forget their birthday, then that's not even okay b'diavad, okay? So there's like three levels. There's lechatchila, you should remember it beforehand. B'diavad, if you remembered it late or had to be reminded, and then not b'diavad, like it's not even okay at all, is if you just totally forget about it or don't care about it. Okay, so that's the analogy here. All right, we're gonna use this terminology a lot. Okay, so hold this Rambam in your head. Okay, it definitely sounds like the Rambam is saying that you're not allowed to mess it up. Okay, sorry, you're not allowed to change it, but if you do, then as long as you preserve God's name and the kingship and the Inyan of the bracha, then you're okay. Okay, now let's go to I think this is as good of a place as any to introduce the big myth. Okay, so I'm calling this the big myth about nusach. Okay, and I'll state it in as explicit terms as possible. Okay, which is when we say that Ezra and his Beis Din created the nusach ha-Tefillah, this means that they created a word for word text of every single bracha, okay? Much like, in other words, and I saw this term, I don't know what this prefix means, but I'll use it because it sounds cool. an ur-siddur, okay, i.e. an original siddur, okay, that had a precise script. Okay, and I'm saying this in a specifically in a deliberately wordy way. Okay, precise script for every bracha and all tefilah. Okay, and then so then the question is, this is part of the myth. Okay, how did all the different nuschaos develop? So the answer is gradual changes over time. Okay, and that's the vague notion that that whether it's geographically spread out, then these changes evolved, or like copyist mistakes or whatever, and it spread out. And just to actually show you, if I ask you to list nuschaos, you would probably list the common ones like Ashkenaz, Sfard, Sephardic. Okay, but I want to show you this list. Okay, so there are a bunch. This is not in any order. There are a bunch of nuschaos that are not as well known. Okay, so you've got Italy. Okay, which is I first encountered this when my brother had an exchange student in his class who was from Rome, and they davened the Roman nusach. Okay, and he had his own way of laning and everything. Okay, Aleppo. This is in Syria. There's another tradition in Aleppo. There's in Eretz Yisrael, which I believe refers to the Jews who were in Israel, like contemporaneously with the Jews in Bavel. Okay, so it's like Talmud Yerushalmi, when that was composed. Ashkenaz. Okay, I don't know exactly what this is. The long Egyptian version from the Geniza. Okay, so a lot of these findings we only know now from the Cairo Geniza. So the one used in Egypt. Okay, another Geniza version. China. Okay, we know that there were Jews who made it to China. Spain, Provence, Persia, North Africa, France, Sadigon Siddur, Rav Amram Siddur, which by the way, Rav Amram was the first one to write down the Siddur. The Siddur was, that's another part of the myth, by the way, which I'll explain. I don't know who this Rav Shlomo ben Nazan is. Romaniot, okay, Rambam, Yemen, okay, and maybe there are even more than that. Okay, I had Nusach evolution, Nusach tree. This is another graphic. I don't know who came up with this, but this is a thing about the evolution of tefilah. Okay, so you have here on screen the Tanaitic prayer texts. Okay, this is the ones that that are referenced in the Mishnayos and the Brises. Two main branches: the Palestinian liturgy, Palestinian meaning in Israel, under Roman rule, is Palestine, and then the Babylonian liturgy. This branched off Palestinian to the Romaniot and the Roman, which became Proto-Ashkenazic, which became German and Northern France. Okay, you've got all these different versions here. And then the Babylonian one went down to Rav Amram and Sadigon, which became Sephardic, and you had mixing and stuff. Okay, so you see a bunch of other ones here that I didn't mention. The Polish, Eastern European, Hasidic Sfard, Nusach Achid, Beis Yosef. Okay, so a lot of these things. Baladi. Okay, all these things. Okay, fine. So part of the myth is there were gradual changes over time, which largely occurred, okay, when the siddur was part of Torah Shabbal Peh and not written down. Okay, and then once it was written down, in the time of Rav Amram Gaon, then copyists errors also contributed. Okay, then the rise of the printing press helped and hurt. Okay, because it helped in the sense that it led to a standardization and spreading true nuschaos. But then you get typos, and then that gets promulgated, and that's bad. Okay, so that's the big myth. Okay, any questions on this right now? I thought I saw a hand go up. I wasn't sure. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to read myth busting from 4 sources, okay, in reverse chronological order. The first one is an academic who I have not heard of, but he's a big researcher on tefilah, or was, I guess. I don't think he's still alive. Second is from one of the Acharonim, Shadal. The third is from a Rishon, the Rashba, and the fourth is from a Gaon, Sadigon. Okay, now I actually have to give credit. Hold on. Where did I put it? I can't find. Yeah, I can't find the other book right now. Okay, the one who brought this to my attention, I'm just looking at my books, hold on. Yeah. Okay, so here's our book advertisement. The ones who brought this to my attention are, hold on. This book by Rabbi Daniel Sperber on changes in Jewish liturgy, options and limitations. Okay, so he is a Rav and a scholar. He's published 30 books and 400 articles, including an 8-volume series on the history of minhagim. Okay, so really intense researcher, researching both from traditional sources and then like new findings. And then the other one is the siddur that was also recently published called Hasidur Mimakorosav by what's his name? Maybe it's the other cover by Moshe Tzvi Weider. Okay, and this is a cool siddur that basically it goes through the text of the tefillah, different versions, and then it has a photo of the earliest version that we have on record in manuscript form of each tefillah. So this is also useful, and he has an introduction here where he busts this myth. So that's where I got a lot of the sources from, and these are the first people who really like opened my eyes to how tefillah worked. Okay, so
sorry, what was the name of the second one?
Hasidur Mimakorosav.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, sorry. I'm introducing this prematurely. So I forgot I have examples here. Okay. So here are some examples that Rabbi Sperber, the author of the first book, presents. Okay. So these are three well-known tefillahs. Okay. So Shema Kolenu. Okay. And the Shema Esrei. So I have them on screen here, but I'm just going to read it. So one, and this is organized from short to long. So you have this version, Shema Kolenu Hashem Elokeinu, V'rachim Aleinu, V'kabel Barachim Es Tefilosenu. Baruch Hashem Shemei Tefillah. So hear our voice, Hashem our God. Have mercy on us and accept our tefillos with mercy. Blessed are you, Hashem, who hears tefillah. Okay. Second version. Shema Bikolenu u'Shema Tefillasenu v'rachem aleinu v'aseh mehera bakashasenu kikel chanun v'rachum ata. Baruch Hashem Shemei Tefillah. Okay. So basically the same, but adds in a couple of other praises and requests. Okay, then you've got one that's similar to ours. Shema b'kolenu Hashem Elokeinu v'chus barachem leinu v'kabel barachim es tefilosenu kikel shemea tefilosenu v'tachaninu ata baruch Hashem shemea tefillah. Okay, and then you've got this longer one. Shema b'kolenu Hashem Elokeinu chus barachem v'chamol barachem leinu v'kabel barachim v'vraton es tefilosenu kikel shemea v'tefilosenu v'tachaninu ata v'reikam milfnecha al teshivenu ki av male rachmim rabim ata v'he'asar lanu malkeinu b'tefilosenu u'shma na'akasenu kasher shamata es na'akas avosenu baruch Hashem shemea tefillah. Okay, now I don't know about you, but when I read this, it's a little improbable to my mind that this was just a gradual evolution. Okay, of like, in other words, by gradual evolution, I mean, we have, for example, a machlokes in Girsa about whether we say in Birkas Hamazon Eretz ha kedosha or gedusha, Okay, Gimel and Dalet. Okay, fine. That can be or Gimel and Kuf. That can change. Or like Re'e v'anyenu or Re'e na v'anyenu. Okay, I can see how the word na can get added or detracted. Okay, but this is adding sentences. Now here's a more extreme version. Okay, the Birkas Haminim, which was instituted later after the main Shmona Esrei for heretics. So the first version, we have 3 versions here. La mashumadim al tihisikva. May there be no hope for the apostates. Umalchus Zadon ta'aker u'tashaber b'yamino. May the malicious kingdom be uprooted and broken in our day. Baruch Hashem shaver rishayim u'machnei zedim. Blessed are you, Hashem, who breaks the wicked and humbles the deliberate sinners. Okay, that's one version. Second version. Lamashumadim ati sikva im lo yashuva l'torasacha. May there be no hope for the apostates if they do not return to your Torahs. Hanotrim v'haminim korega yovidu. May the Christians and heretics instantly perish. Yimachu misefer chaim v'im tzadikim al yikasevu. May they be erased from the book of life and not written with the righteous. Baruch Hashem machnei zedim. Okay, blessed are you, Hashem, who humbles the deliberate sinners. And then this last one, Lamshudim al tihisikva umalchu zadon mehera ta'akeru teshaber v'tachnia b'yaminu v'hanotrim v'aminu korega yovidu v'chol oivei amcha v'hatzorehem mehera yikaresu ushvor ol hagoyim me'al tzavarenu. Baruch Hashem shaver rishayim u'machnei zedim. Okay, so may there be no hope for the apostates, and may the malicious kingdom be uprooted, broken, and humbled in our days, and may the Christians and heretics instantly perish, and all their enemies, the enemies of your people, and their tormentors quickly be cut off. May you break the yoke of the Gentiles from upon our necks. Blessed are you, Hashem, who breaks the wicked and humbles the deliberate sinners. Okay, Okay, again, so big difference between mentioning Christians and not mentioning them, or our enemies versus just the apostates. Yeah, Vanessa?
Sorry, just this is slowing down, but do you guys say any of these? I'm trying to figure out how confused I'm supposed to be for being Sephardic or versus like just
No, so
both.
I don't know anyone, I've never seen a siddur that is used by anyone that mentions Christians. Okay, but
That's the only thing throwing you. Okay.
well, I mean, these are historical nuschaos. I'm saying these are all examples of things that were actually said and that are from actual siddurim.
But
Okay,
all of these are historical. Like none of
yeah,
these.
these are historical.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I just don't. These were not dated, and I don't know exactly where they come from. Now, I'm going to give you one more example, and this is he presents 5 here, but I'm going to just read the shortest one, the longest one. So for Barech Aleinu, for the 9th bracha of the Shemona Esrei, so short one. Barchinu Hashem Elokeinu b'chol ma'aseh yadeinu, baruch Hashem mevarech hashanim. Okay, bless us, Hashem our God, in all our endeavors. Blessed are you, Hashem, who blesses the years. Okay, now here I'm going to read this long one, the 4th one. Borech Aleinu Hashem Elokeinu es hashna azos l'toa ve'es kol minei tevuasa v'sein tal u'matar al pnei ha'adma l'man shemecha usva es olam klum mi birchos tuvacha urvei pnei sevel mi osher matneos yidacha v'shamar v'hatzila Hashem Elokeinu ve'es hashana azos mikol mini mashchis u'mikol mini franios v'chus v'chamol v'rachem Aleinu v'al kol peroseha u'tela acharisa seva v'shalom u'bracha kibirkas hashanim hatovos v'sein bracha b'maseh yedenu ki kel tov metivata baruch Hashem mevarech hashanim. Okay, so I'm not going to even translate that. You can see, I think it strains credulity to say that this small version, like people, Vanessa, you're right. Is that the Rambam's is also very long that we just changed to, so like to say that this just gradually through little evolution became this long one is a little difficult to say. And I'll show you one more example. I think I have this on Shelo Asani. No, okay. I wish I had a picture of this to post, but okay. So controversial bracha Shelo Asani Isha. Oh, sorry, no. I mean that is controversial, but that's one not what I'm looking for. Shelo Asani Goy, right? Okay, so who did not make me a non-Jew? Okay, so Rabbi Sperber in appendix number 8 finds 19 versions of that bracha. Okay, and here they are: Shelo Asani Arel, who has not made me uncircumcised. Shelo Asani Nachri. I'll just read them. Shelo Asani Ovid Gilulim. Shelo Asani Ovid Kochavim Umazalas. Shelo Asani Goy Kegoya Ha'aratzos. Sha'asani Yisrael. Sha'asisani Mal V'lo Arel. Shelo Asani Arami. Shelo Asani Akum. Shelo Samtani Goy. Shelo Asani Enu Yehudi. Sha'asisani Yisrael. Sha'asisani Tahor V'lo Tameh. Shelo Asani Kuti. Shelo Asani Yishmael. Shelo Asani Ove Kochavim. Shelo Asisani Goy. Sha'asisani Yehudi. Sha'asisani Yisrael V'lo Goy. Okay, so if you see enough examples of these, you start to question the big myth about really, like, was it really that hard for people to remember Shelo Asani Goy, and then it became all these other things, like gradually, or is something else going on? Okay, so now I will present the 4 sources I mentioned, starting with this academic source. I think it's Yehuda or Y. Heinemann in Ha-Tefillah, ha-Yehudit. Okay, he lived from 1915 to 1978. He says like this: furthermore, when the mandatory and fixed prayers were formulated, okay, the tefilah v'keva, they, the sages, did not determine their exact formulation, unlike what is accepted in popular books on prayer. Okay, that's the big myth. The sages established a framework, the number of blessings in each kind of prayer, such as 18 in the weekly Amidah, 7 in those of the Sabbaths and festivals, and so on. They also establish the basic content of each blessing, such as a request for the rebuilding of Jerusalem or the ingathering of the exiles, but they did not determine or wish to determine the literal formulations of any blessing or prayer. Generally speaking, this was in the hands of the worshiper, or more exactly, the shliach tzibor, the prayer leader. So we learn a great deal of time after the mandatory and fixed prayers were established in the Yavne generation. The actual formulation, nusach, remained free and flexible, not merely because there were no written prayer books, but because this is what the creators of the liturgy wanted. For at no time did they consider doing away with or limiting the element of dynamism and vitality in the versions of our prayer. Okay, I'm going to read one more and then we'll summarize. Okay. Oh, sorry, going on. Is this important? I'll read it anyway. Even after the versions began to be crystallized and became familiar to the worshipers of most communities, dynamic creativity continued in the formulation of the mandatory prayers. It was approximately then that the piyut, the liturgical poem, was born, first in the land of Israel and later on in many other countries. It served to bring variety into what was becoming standardized, to exchange one fixed version for many other alternatives. The early piyut was not merely an addition to the fixed prayers, but eventually took their place. By means of the piyut, the element of dynamism was reintroduced into the prayer book, which underwent continuous change. Okay, next source is Shadal, and I unfortunately don't have access to this, so I can't read it in Hebrew. Shadal, in the introduction to his siddur, which was the Roman nusach, he says, our predecessors of blessed memory set the format of blessings for us to thank God and pray to him, but they did not mean by their decree that the text of prayers should be entirely fixed like a nail that cannot be moved, that one may neither add to the prayer nor subtract from it. Rather, the purpose of their decree was to set the matters about which we must thank God and pray to him for all of Israel, to fix the general order of the blessings. This was so that the major part of prayer and the theme of each blessing and their openings and closings would be the same for all Jews, wherever they may be. But our predecessors of blessed memory never wrote the blessings and prayers in a book. Instead, they let each individual or shliach tzibur lengthen or shorten them according to his understanding. That is why they instituted the silent Shemona Esrei, so that the shliach tzibur could rehearse his prayer to himself before reciting it for the congregation. Rabbi Eliezer said, and we actually started the year on this, this is in Pirkei Avos, one who makes his prayer keva, his prayer is not tachanunim. Oh, sorry. That's a Mishnah in Brachos. One who makes his prayer keva, which means like fixed or permanent, his prayer is not tachanunim. His colleague, Rabbi Shimon ben Nasana, often said, this is Pirkei Avos, do not make your prayer keva, instead make it rachamim and tachanunim before God. That's in Avos 2:13. The meaning of keva here is that one prays with fixed words and says nothing new, as Rabba and Rav Yosef explained in Brachos 29b. And Rashi says that the term keva means, just like today, it was the same yesterday and will be the same tomorrow. Okay, so let's take stock of what we have here. Actually, I'm going to go up and write this next to the big myth. So the big myth is that there was a script. Okay, the big truth about nusach is Chazal never wrote a word for word nusach ha-Tefillah. Okay, rather they established. Okay, and here's the list. The number of brachos, okay, to be said on each occasion. Okay, so that's like the 18 or 19 in the weekday Shemona Esrei, 7 on holidays. Also, the number of brachos that you say, Sheva brachos, or what you say on, 4 brachos of Birkas Hamazon, etc. Okay, so they established the number of brachos. They established the basic. We'll just continue to use our Hebrew term, the inyan habracha. Okay, which means the basic content, theme, subject. Okay. And then they established the matbea habracha, okay, which is the format, okay, whether it is a long form or short form bracha, okay, but the particular words they left entirely up to the worshiper, okay, or the shliach tzibur, prayer leader, okay, yeah, okay, thereby preserving the I'll use his word, dynamism, creativity, and personalization potential that was part of the Doraisa. Okay, so that is what he is saying. Okay, now according to this, okay, how does this change our answer to the question? How did all the different nuschaos develop? So what would you say? Yeah, Ayala?
It was by design that each specific community would kind of create their own, or each individual community.
Right? Yeah, each community, okay, each community or each, let's just say rabbinic leader or liturgical poet in each community wrote their own tefillos, okay, and these became the tefillos that were used in that community. Okay, and then once they were written down, written down, then they started becoming fixed and were subject to many more of the changes, that we know happened. Yeah, Vanessa.
Your last sentence might have answered part of this, but
yeah,
if the whole point was to make it dynamic and to have it be personalized to each person in each community, and I understand like following once, was it changing day by day? Was it changing once? Because if it's changing once, then what's the point? That just means that you have a bunch of fixed tefillot instead of one
right.
fixed tefillah. Like,
yeah, so this is why I like Shadal quoting Rashi, which is that we have this Mishnah in Brachos that says, if you make your tefilah keva, then your tefilah is not tachanunim, which is supplications. And then you have the more explicit statement in Avos, don't make your tefilah keva. And Rashi says, what does keva mean? It means that you daven the same text every day, right? So it's sadly ironic, I think Rashi would say at least, that this is exactly how we daven every day. We daven with the same text every single day, okay? And in fact, the Rabbi Sperber brings up something, an amusing anecdote. Let me just see if I can find it. Hold on. I think this is in his intro. I think this is a Hasidic anecdote. Give me 1 second. Oh, yeah, here we go. Yeah, so he says, I have been a communal rabbi here in Jerusalem for over 4 decades. Nonetheless, I never served as a chazan, a shliach tzibor, a prayer leader. And the main reason for that is because of my knowledge. Sorry, the reason for that is that because of my knowledge of the complex variety of versions and the rationale, I was never quite sure of my own nusach and often stumbled even when reading a standard prayer book. Okay, perhaps this is what the great Sanzer Rebbe, Rabbi Yekutiel Yehuda Halberstam of Sanz Klausenberg, meant when he reportedly said that he wanted to establish a fixed text for the Amidah. That when he wanted to establish a fixed text for the Amidah, he listened carefully to his father's recitation of it and recorded each benediction in faithful detail. However, he was astounded when he heard a completely different version several days later, and after a few times realized that the versions changed each time. Okay, so it does seem to be that by design it is supposed to be fluid and change from day to day. Okay, now again, we're going to set aside questions about what does this mean for us today. Okay, but that'll have to be taken up later on. Okay, let's read now I wanted to say one thing also. I want to point out here. Okay, Shadal says that is why they instituted the silent Shemona Esrei, so that the Shliach Tzibor could rehearse his prayer to himself before reciting it for the congregation. Now, factually speaking, I'm pretty sure that the reason why there is a silent Shemona Esrei is because, since Tefillah was not printed in prayer books, not everyone knew how to daven. So people would daven on their own, but then the people who wouldn't know how to daven would wait for the repetition. And then the chazan would daven and everyone would fulfill their obligation through that. Okay. But he's adding something new, which is that the shliach tzibor, see, for us, the chazan is just someone who says davening out loud. Okay. And he's saying the same thing that's printed in the siddur and the same thing that everyone is saying to themselves. But in the olden days, if you look through the halachos about who can be chazan, there are very strict halachos about how wise you have to be and how ethical you have to be and how old you have to be, and you have to have a beard and all this other stuff. And it strikes us as weird because nowadays we just ask, oh, you want to daven mincha, But back then, the shliach tzibor actually was involved in composing the tefillos, So again, I don't know if this happened every day, but it'd be like, if you led davening in yeshiva as a shliach tzibor, you would have to sit and think, okay, well, what are the needs of my community? And how do I express a tefillah that resonates with what everyone does? It was a very, very weighty task. Yeah, Vanessa?
I didn't realize I was unmuted. If we're talking about a tefillah that everyone, this is putting it brashly, but I don't mean it quite as brash. If everyone's just kind of not making it up, obviously there's a formula, but like there's not like a specific words you need to know how to say. Like you need to know the general idea. Why was it so pervasive to not know how to daven?
Good question.
Okay.
That's a good question, especially given the fact that that was the purpose of them making the brachos, right? That's a very good question. So I don't know, but I'm going to actually write that let's actually start a list of questions that we're not taking up this time, but that we have to look into in the future. Okay, so we'll call this outstanding questions. Okay, in the sense of outstanding, that they're good questions, but also that they're remaining. Okay, which is that if there wasn't a set text, okay, why was it so hard for people, for the average Jew to daven? Okay, and doesn't that defeat the purpose of Ezra and his Bastian creating a nusach to begin with? Yeah. Okay. Let's go on now and read the Rashba. So there might be people who are listening to this, okay, who look at this academic and they're like, oh, that's an academic, okay, and then look at Shadal and they're like, oh, that's Shadal, okay, because people, not everyone likes Shadal, okay. The fact that the translator of Shadal, my friend Dan Klein, has in the beginning of either his Shemos volume or his Vayikra volume was Shadal Orthodox, okay, is a telling thing. Okay, he concludes that Shadal was Orthodox. The reason why it's a question is because Shadal was in Italy in the 1800s. There were no categories of Orthodox back then. Okay, and he does quote from classical sources, but he also quotes from Christians and non-Jews. And his ideas are Italy was its own thing. Okay, so that's that. So there are people who don't like Shadal, but everyone likes the Rashba. So let's quote from the Rashba. Okay, so he says like this. This is in the Chidushim on Maseches Brachos Daf Yud Aleph Amud Aleph. This is my translation. I could not translate one line, so I'm just going to read that when I get to it, but not translate it. Venerally, Demai de Kasani Malcolm Shamru Lakatzer Eno Rasha Laharich Malcolm Amru Laharich Eno Rasha Lakatzer. So in Brachos, when it says wherever the sages said to shorten the blessing, you're not permitted to lengthen it, and wherever they said to lengthen it, was not permitted to shorten it. Okay, so if you just read that statement, you might think it means you cannot add words or take away words. Okay, and he is now going to refute that. He says, "Lav lememrash eno rashe lakater laharich benusach habracha." This does not mean that you're not permitted to shorten or lengthen the nusach of the bracha, the formulation. Okay, klomar, meaning to say l'rabos u'l'mayit b'miloseha, to increase or take away from its words. De'im kain, because if that's what they meant when they say you can't lengthen or shorten the bracha. Haya lahem lasakin nusach kol bracha ubracha b'milos menuyos uvinyanim yeduim. Then they should have, the sages should have established a nusach of each and every bracha with numbered words and clearly known contents, and teach us the precise nusach of every bracha. V'lo amru, v'zeh lo matzinu b'shum makom. We never find that they did this. V'lo amru ela b'milos sheyesh hakpada b'hen levad. We don't find that they've done this. They only told us those words that they insisted upon. Now, he gives a bunch of examples. Like a machlok is about mentioning rain. Okay, I'm not sure what machlok is he's talking about. Vital, veruchos, and dew and winds. Here's a familiar one. They say in Birkas Hamazon, Kol shelo amar bris ba'aretz o shelo hiskir malchus beis David bebonei Yerushalayim machazir noso. Anyone who does not mention the concept of the bris in the bracha of the second bracha of Birkas Hamazon on Eretz Yisrael, or anyone who does not mention the Davidic monarchy in the bracha of Bonei Yerushalayim, we make him go back and say it again. Okay. Likewise, im lo hiskir Torah ba'aretz. If you don't say the word Torah in the bracha about Eretz Yisrael, in the second bracha of the Birkas Hamazon, ksas milos be'emes v'yatziv kagon yitzias Mitzrayim umalchus ukriyas Yamsuf. Okay, umachas bechoros. So similar other things like in emes v'yativ. If you don't mention the exodus from Egypt, or kingship, or the splitting of the sea, of reeds, and the plague of the firstborn. Okay, and then this last part I didn't. Oh, sorry, that's that. So in other words, they told us in specific brachos, you got to mention this word, right? But doesn't that imply, he's saying, that the other words they did not legislate, that you don't have to say the other words, and you could say other words? Like they're just saying, no, these are the words you have to say. Okay. Then he says, "Aval b'shar nusach habrachos," but in the rest of the nusach of the brachos, lo nasnu behen chacham shir shiomar kach v'kach milos lo pachas v'lo yoser. They did not give us an exact measure saying you have to say a specific number of words, no less and no more. V'lo amru kama milos yomar bazo shetikra arucha o katzar. And they did not say how many words constitute a long bracha or a short bracha. V'lo od, not only that, ela shebeferush amru, they said explicitly b'shmona esrei shel tefilah. she'ilu ratza lahosif b'chol bracha ubracha me'ein habracha mosif. In each one of the brachas of the Shemona Esrei, if you want to add to the bracha in line with the theme of the bracha, you can do it. Even if you add way more words than the fundamental basic text of the bracha, even though those are brachos ketzaros, those are short brachos. In other words, short, again, his overarching argument is short and long does not refer to the length of the bracha. And the evidence of this is in Atachone L'Adam Das, you can add 10 paragraphs, okay, if you want to, even though it's a short bracha. Ubebirkas haperos, okay, in brachos on fruits, which is another short bracha. Amru b'samach, they say on brachos daf yud beis amud aleph, nakit kasa dachamra biade v'kasaver deshikrahu pasach b'deshikra v'sim b'dachamra yatza. So if you, let's say you have a glass of what you think is wine, sorry, what is wine but you think it's beer, and you start saying Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam shakoni b'dvaro, and then you realize, oh, this is wine, you say Borei Pri Hagafen, okay, you're yote. Kolomar, afilu amar behedya shakoni b'dvaro Borei Pri Hagafen kadas onim. Okay, Geonim. So in other words, you're yote even if you do that. V'avopi shebikas haperos ki katsara v'achshav he'ericha. So even though the bracha on fruits is short and you've lengthened it, ubirkas hazan arucha karina la b'tosefta v'yushami. And even though the bracha, the first bracha in birkas mazon is long, okay, as it says in the Tosefta and Yerushalmi, v'afilu hachi asikna l'kaman gabe binyamin raya. It says there's one of the Amoraim, I think, says afilu amar barich rachmana mari dehai pita yatza. If a person said, "Blessed is the merciful one, master of this bread," he's yote. Umash mahasan b'gemara dafilu l'chatchila midamasinan ala elu nemarim b'chol lashon. And I don't think everyone learns this way, but the Rashba learns that you could even do this l'chatchila. Vahi afilu l'chatchila. You can even say, in other words, instead of, he seems to be learning, instead of saying birkas hamazon, the first bracha, if you just said, blessed is the merciful one, the master of this bread, you're yote, even though you're not saying the text of the bracha and you're shortening it to a short one. Wait, that doesn't make any sense. Okay, maybe that's, see, I was under the impression that this is if you said this as an alternate to the hamotzi, okay, well, whatever, this might be getting into something that we're not sure of. Okay, then he quotes an example I don't understand. He says, I didn't have a chance to look it up. Lo amar ani Hashem Elokecha, eno omer emes v'omer modi manachnu lach, v'afal pi she'oso nusach katzer me'od, min nusach ha'mesukan l'mi she'omer ani Hashem Elokecha, u'kmo she'amarnu la'el. Okay, then he gets to the punchline. Ela vadai nira, rather it seems to be certainly, she'ein hakpada beribuy hanusach u'miuto. We don't care about the expansion or contraction of the nusach, ela b'matbeya shetavu bo chachamim, just the format. V'hu, namely, sheyesh brachos sheposchos b'baruch v'chosmos b'baruch. Some brachos begin and end with baruch. V'hi hanikras b'chol makom arucha. That's called a long format bracha. U'kedegarsinim b'Yerushalmi, as the Yerushalmi says, Amar Rabbi Yudan matbeya katzar posech b'baruch v'eino chosim b'baruch. Matbeya aruch posech b'baruch v'chosim b'baruch. So the only thing they care about is the length of the bracha and whether it begins or ends with baruch. Okay. So let's add to our list here. Of what did the Chachamim establish? So they established the number of brachos to be said on each occasion, the inyan of the bracha, the matbeya of the bracha, the format, and in some cases, particular words that need to be said. Okay, but not a set text. Okay, let's read one more, and then I want to go back to contrasting the myth with the reality. Again, I'm sorry I don't have the original Hebrew here, but Sadigon, as quoted by Rabbi Sperber, says in the introduction to the Siddur, so this is Sadigon writing about his own Siddur. I saw fit to collect in this Siddur the prayers, praises, and benedictions which are essential in their primary characteristics as they were in their formulations before the exile and after it, and to place them in the Siddur. And I have made the additions or omissions to them that I heard about, such as were added or omitted in accordance with the will of such who acted on their own initiative, villagers or city dwellers, or people from a district or land. I have also forbidden the recitation of anything that annuls or conflicts with the primary intent of this prayer or the prayer or blessing. Regarding that which does not, I have nonetheless noted that in any case, it is not part of the basic tradition. So you see, Sadigon here is saying there is a core nusach of the bracha, the essential primary characteristics that we try to preserve, but then there were a bunch of variants, and like he mentioned some of the additions and things that were made on their own initiative, but he's acknowledging that there was no set text that was made. Okay, we have a couple more things. I'll just read this again. I didn't have time to look this up inside. The Rashba in Shalos Teshuvos 1:473 Concerning your question about the order in which you are accustomed to recite in your prayers and your prayer books, different places do not have identical versions. And in each place, if he did not say the prayer thus, it does not matter. Ein bekach. Okay, it just doesn't matter. And not as those who say that this is called deviating from the version established by the sages. So what I like about this source is he's saying, don't think that being mishana min matbea shtavu chachamim, that deviating from the set text means deviation from the words. Deviating from the words we don't care about. All we care about is the format and the theme. Okay. Similarly, in Tshuva 470, he says, one should not say that anyone who changes the versions established by the sages regarding the benedictions errs, for this applies only when he changes the structure of a blessing by saying a short version instead of a long one, i.e. that he begins it with Baruch but does not end it, or that he ends it but does not begin it. Okay, likewise, the Meiri says, in any event, to add words that conform with the general sense of the benediction, or relating to the occasion in the form of piyutim that constitute praise to the Lord, conforming to the sense of the blessing, one may do so without concern. Ein chashash. You could just add whatever you want as long as it's in line with the general meaning of the bracha. Even in the benedictions of the Amidah, a person may add his personal request in accordance with the theme of the benediction, as is clearly stated in Maseches Sofrim, chapter 18. And it is on this basis, the basis of this view, that the custom is to add piyutim conforming to the theme of the benedictions. And should you say that this is only ex post facto, b'diavad, as some have suggested, others have explained that this is even ab initio, meaning that you could even do this l'chadchila. Okay, so just to summarize this here, in our stuff about the truth, which is so are we permitted to customize our brachos today? So according to the sources we've examined, again, I'm not saying this is everyone, okay, meaning the Rashba, the Meiri, Sadia Gaon, Shadal, okay, at least, you are 100% l'chatchila permitted to add whatever you want into, or take away whatever you want, okay, whatever you want, or take away whatever you want from the text in your siddur, okay, as long as your change doesn't interfere with the inyan habracha or the matbea habracha, okay, meaning the matbea meaning the format, okay, or the inyan, and the inyan is the subject, theme, or or concept, and hold on, I'll add one more thing. And as long as you aren't undermining the inyan or the halachos. Now, again, just to reiterate, I shouldn't have to say this in this group. I'm not a posek. I'm not poskening when I say this. I'm saying according to what these sources would suggest. Okay, we're gonna have to explore, practically speaking, what we should and shouldn't do later on. Which I'll add this question. To quote Ian Malcolm from Jurassic Park, okay, is I don't know the exact phrase. You were so, he's talking about the scientists, right? You scientists were so preoccupied with whether you could that you didn't stop to ask whether you should. Okay, so the question is just because we can make such changes, does that mean this is a good idea and something we should do? Okay, and I'm going to say, I'm not going to answer this now, but there's tension in the sources. Okay, yeah, Vanessa.
Okay, I had two questions. I was going to do the second one second, but I think you actually, the last question you raised is kind of what I want to ask. And I also know you're not a posek. Just throwing that out there. I'm not asking.
Yeah, I don't care. The more you say that, the better. But yeah.
Yeah. To what extent, if we are allowed to play around, like to what extent are we allowed to play around? Because like, and I have an example for this, and I have a question, and like, this also eliminates the idea of like, oh, you should do what your follow your family's minhag or whatever. Because my dad personally, and again, it's also kind of confusing because like, well, Shuvish, whatever, but like, Rav Ben Chaim is the Av Beidin of our community. So he apparently told my dad, I wasn't there, I don't know, I was a baby, told my dad, like, you don't have to say the whole Birkat Hamazon if you don't want to. There's like a little card that has like the baby version, which
Yeah.
is like a little longer than what you said before, but like pretty short.
Yeah.
And like you're totally Yotze.
Yeah.
And like
Right.
he sometimes reads that and sometimes reads the full one. It's really just
Right.
a matter of like timing again. Like that's funky. So like I technically have minhag for both. Am I allowed
Okay,
to?
right. So
Again, I'm
the
not
thing
answering
I
this
will answer, okay, is that you are definitely Yotze. I mean, assuming that the card has the minimal name of God, God's kingship, and then the main concept of the Birkat Hamazon. So everyone, even the Rambam, who as we'll see, not today but later, is the most strict about changing the tefilah. He holds that you are Yotze. The
Yeah, I
question
think the card
is
from
that
the
just
Rambam,
b'diavad or is that lechatchila? You know, can you, like, if a person said today, or I'll tell you what I was thinking, and I need to find a posik who permits this. I've wanted to do this for years. I have taught high school students who are like, davening the whole Shemona Esrei is like way too long, but if you could give me a 1-sentence version of each bracha, then I would say it. Okay. So I can't, you know, to find a posik who would lechatchila permit that, I'll have to look. But definitely b'diavad, you're Yotze, you know.
Okay.
Yeah. And by the way, this also answers the question that someone asked earlier about do you need to, you know, if you switch a nusach, then what do you need to do? So again, I originally thought that no, there's minhag Ashkenaz and there's minhag Sfard, you know, but when I'm reading this now, it seems like no. There are certain things where there's a different minhag. So let's say, for example, you know, let's say a halachic shita of whether, I don't know if this is actually true, you know, there's a minhag that in the second bracha of the Shemona Esrei, everyone holds we say Mashi Baruch Amrita Geshem now, but there's some people who on the other season don't say anything, and then people who say Morid Hatal. You know, that might be an actual minhag that you need to like do Hataras Nadarim for. Okay, but just changing words in tefillah and having different versions of the bracha, based on what I think right now, that's not even something that has the status of I mean, it has the status of minhag in the sense that Jews do it, but it does not have the status of like a binding thing that you're stuck saying these exact words and that you can change from day to day. Again, from what I'm seeing in these sources, not a posting. Yeah, Vanessa?
Can I still have my other question, but can I push on something just to like more to push my own clarification on it?
Yeah.
But it wouldn't that only apply if you already had the thing to change your davening every so often? But if you were saying it rigidly anyway, one way for a while, even if you're allowed to change nusach, isn't that still a fixed thing that you're changing?
I don't think so. I think that is just what I would say is a person who's doing that, it's not a minhag, it is just violating the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos that says don't make your tefilah keva every day, you know. So it's like if someone said, you know, I have a minhag to not give a lot of tzedakah. Do I have to keep that? You know, like no, it's just you're not doing the mitzvah in the proper way, you know.
You have to be doing not hadar.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Right.
Then my other question was, okay, if you're allowed to expand a contract as you will, is that only within the confines of Hebrew, or are you allowed to do that in English?
So this is another good question that has to do with the parameters of davening in other languages. Okay. I think we should take that up separately. Okay. Yeah, Ayala, I'll put this on our list.
So when he says that you can't change the inyan of the bracha,
Yeah.
So I understand what that would mean if you're subtracting. When you add to the bracha, do you have to make sure that every single thing you add is in line with inyan, or is it just like you can't like fundamentally change it or something?
It's a very good question. Because even in these examples, you know, let's take for example, you know, this was originally Birkas Haminim, right, which is about heretics specifically. That's why the bracha was created. Okay, but then this version mentions Oive Amcha V'tzorerehem, which are not heretics. I mean, Amalek is not a heretic. Amalek is, or Nazis are not heretic. I mean, maybe they also are, but the problem is that they are preying upon the Jews. You know, they're trying to harm us. You know, so it seems like at some point those were added. And now you could say that no, maybe it's that their interpretation of the original inyan of the bracha was enemies, and then you know the minimal version is only apostates because those were the local enemies, you know. So, and I find that a lot of these questions will come down to what is the inyan of the bracha. You know, again, famous example is you know, Shelo Asani Isha, right? There are, you know, so there's this whole question of what bracha do women say. So you have an opinion that says they don't make any bracha. because there was no bracha ever created for them. Then you have, the common practice, shasani kirtzono. Then you have another bracha of, asani isha. There are some people who say that, So the question might be, what do you hold is the inyan of that bracha? If the inyan of the bracha is specifically thanking God for not making you a woman, so then you can't say that shasani isha or shasani kirtzono is the inyan of the bracha, But maybe the bracha is thanking God for who you are, in which case maybe these things do apply, In the standard Ashkenazic version, are minim not mentioned? I think they're not, right? I mean, I say when I daven Ashkenaz, then I say minim.
You literally start the bracha saying la minim whatever.
So in our yeshiva we say v'chol minim krego yovedu. But I think the standard Ashkenazic one does not. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. I think what I would like to do is this happens to be a good stopping point. I just want to see if I want to give one analogy, okay, and then we'll stop for today, which is that the analogy between the big myth and the big truth is analogy. Oh, sorry, hold on a second here. So hold on a second here. So analogy, okay, is the big myth. According to the big myth, the original nusach was like a movie screenplay, okay, where all the words are written out, but sometimes the director allows the actor to say the words in a slightly different way or ad lib a line or two, okay? And that's what, because everyone holds you can add in requests to the Shemona Esrei, okay? But then the big truth, according to the big truth, what would you say the corresponding analogy is?
Like complete improvisation?
I would not say complete improvisation.
But like you have like a dozen scripts in front of you and you can pick any.
Okay, so I'll tell you what I think the best analogy was like long form improv, okay, in which you're given a specific prompt, okay, and you can take that in whatever direction you want as long as it's within the prompt. Okay, so those are two very, very different models, and by the way, this is really what this, again, there's a lot of questions that we have to answer here. This sheds light on what Ezra and his Beis Din were doing, which is what was the goal in their change, right? So really they wanted not everyone saying the same words, but they wanted everyone davening about the same things, and you can give an example, like in America, newsflash, America is very polarized right now, okay? And I'm sure if you ask the people on the far left and the people on the far right, what do you want for the country? They would say completely different things, So what Ezra and his Beis Din were doing when they saw the Jews spreading out was we want the Jews to be asking for the same things, okay? But we want, this answers our last question of, doesn't this take away an essential aspect of the Doraisa, the personal element? They wanted to preserve the Doraisa as much as possible and allow for this fluidity, okay? And also this answers the question of why did they take this route? Partially answers the question of they did not completely change the structure of the Doraisa. They put up guardrails to keep people within the parameters of davening for the right things. Okay. I actually want to go now because I want to daven at the same time that the yeshiva is davening because I can't actually make it to the minyan in time. But next time, Bli Neder, what we're going to do is continue to explore, these outstanding questions and specifically the question of how much should we change and are there reasons why we shouldn't change? Why don't we just like make up our own tefillos every day? Okay. So that'll be the goal for next time. Okay. But I hope this was an enlightening, revelation as it was for me. Okay. Have a good Shabbos, everyone. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Have a good Shabbos.
Thank you so much.